So in this episode of the podcast, I'm actually talking to my friend Asa Hershoff, who is a Lama within the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. He's someone who very impressively completed the 3 years, 3 month solo retreat, practice retreat, which if you've ever done a lengthy retreat, that's very impressive in and of its own to spend 3 years and 3 months in solid practice. Very respectful of that achievement. So chatting with him in this episode and talking to him about Vajrayana practice. Asa is someone I met recently. I met him 3 months ago now, I guess, very recently, when I visited Bhutan to talk at the Vajrayana conference there. I was the only non-Buddhist, as far as I was aware, talking about Taoist practice at a Vajrayana conference. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking, to be perfectly honest, feeling like the sort of black sheep of the conference. But Asa was very, very kind and looked after me and showed me around and actually introduced me to a lot of Bhutanese culture and introduced me to Vajrayana practice as well as introducing me to a tolku of a particular very skilled practitioner from the past that I have a great connection to as well. So very grateful for that. But Asa is obviously knows far more than I do about Vajrayana. That's not my strength, not at all. So I basically, for this episode, I thought what I'd do is I'd just sit quietly and let Asa do the talking. So you won't hear much from me. I'm there for the ride, just listening to him talk about his experiences. And Asa is a blunt guy when he speaks. Which I appreciate very much. There's a brutal honesty in what he says. So he's talking very much about the good, the bad, the ugly, as far as I can see, of Vajrayana Buddhist practice. So it's really interesting to see someone with a lifetime of experience from inside the tradition saying what they honestly think about the practice and their experiences in it. So hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And like I say, I didn't say much. I just sat and listened and let Asa do the majority of the talking. So thanks.
That's the English version of this, the all English. It's my version of the what's the name of that Bible they have in all of the motels and so on? The
Good News Bible?
The Gideon's Bible.
Gideon's Bible, okay.
We used to find in all the motels, not anymore, since now we live in an unreligious age.
So you've done lots of work translating all of these texts.
Unbelievable.
But clearly. I mean, this isn't a thin book, if nothing else.
It's crazy.
That you're working through. But why did you do it? Because it was like a personal interest or personal challenge? Or was it because you were asked to by somebody in the tradition?
Well, I was probably asked by Machik Labdra in 1100, but that's my theory. But yes, I love the practice. It's a beautiful practice. I mean, this is a chanted ritual with multiplicity of different visualizations. And actually, it's a kind of compendium of many different aspects of Vajrayana. And so you're working through the idea of offering and purification and clearing karma and self-examination and understanding the nature of mind. And particularly it's an offering, so it is designed to be an offering of generosity towards those who need it, the suffering beings of the universe, as well as a homage to the higher enlightened beings. And that's much of what Vajrayana is about. You're sort of suspended between the realms. I always say that Vajrayana, the human realm, is either the bottom of the higher realms or the top of the lower realms.
Sure.
So we're right there in the middle of these 6 realms, and you can flip one way or the other. So we're trying to honor the above and assuage the suffering of the lower, while at the same time freeing oneself from all kinds of false ideations, false identities, and so on.
So excuse my ignorance, like these, the things you translated here that come across like poetry,
yeah, they
essentially.
They're very poetic, beautifully.
So are they, rather than being instructions, they're chants, they're mantra,
they're all melodies. Some of them are pure visualizations, and then they have songs of praise and so on, different lineage prayers, which are homage to the lineage. So again, as I mentioned, there's a tremendous reliance on external forces or forces within your lineage, that they come to your aid and abetment, so that it's hard to imagine in Vajrayana you're just doing something on your own. You're always connected to this lineage of enlightened beings that is pouring down grace to you if you're lucky.
So it's not a go it alone tradition.
And actually they spend a lot of time trying to repair and make sure your relationship is good. You know, they call that samaya, right? Your bond. So there's whole rituals in there included, whole sections of repairing this connection. What did you do wrong, and what errors have you made that you're a disgrace to the whole lineage? So you have to repair your connection. So that's it's a very intense. And people, we used to call it the samaya gun, right? Okay. People are always using that in a negative psychological way to say you're breaking samaya, or your actions are against samaya, as if this is a moral dictum that I've decided whether you have.
It's like it's haram or something.
Yeah, right. And then this is one of the rules, actually, one of the tantric vows. You do not hang out with samaya breakers.
Right. Okay. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's very. It's almost like Scientology.
It's a cult. It is a cult.
No, I don't mean like that. But when people get thrown out of Scientology, they're not allowed to. You're not allowed to mix with even their family members, right?
Well, yeah. Well, it's actually the same with leaving any corporation. You have to sign off.
Sure.
That you don't discuss it.
It's interesting when I look at this. Like the first one I opened to is the Power opening the sky door.
Oh, you wouldn't you?
Well, that side of it's always interested me very much. But it's like when I read this, you've got the description here. On the sole of the right foot is the white drop received from the father, the size of a pea. Yeah. On the sole of the left foot is the red drop received from the mother, the size of a pea. Beautiful. The two rise up and arrive at the secret place, joining to become the size of a small egg.
You're giving away all the secret teachings.
Well, you've translated it. It's your fault. Rising upwards, it arrives at the navel, and so on and so on.
Yeah, it goes up.
Which they read very much
like realms. You're actually going through the realms, as we are clearing your karma of the realms as you go up.
But as a visualization, right?
Yes, it's very much a visualization, and it's sensory as well. Of course, you're supposed to be able to. You're putting that visualization, the red dot here, and it's going up your body. Yes, so that is involved. Okay. But as we know, there can be a serious deficit in terms of one's ability to move energy within the body, because in Vajrayana, there definitely is the tendency, or there's the expectation, that when you think of an area of the body, you're somehow moving energy. Yeah, you're moving something. Obviously, when you experience your internal, something's going on there.
Sure, yeah.
But as we've discussed, unless you've built up sufficient horsepower, you put enough gas in your tank, and actually, as you have taught me, it has to be the right octane, so you have to refine it. I call it refining. You just can't just put kerosene in the tank. Now you've got to refine that raw petroleum into some very high octane so that it can have higher function. You say condensing it or thickening it. Maybe physically it does have a thickened oil, but I think of it also as a higher octane, so you don't have NOx bumps. But we really, truly don't have that. We have a very basic, I could say primitive if I was unkind, but I think it's a very basic understanding of energy in Tibetan Buddhism. They just call it lung. I mean, that's it. Qi.
Sa lung is your practice of it.
Yeah, right? And lung is the energy, or the qi, or it really means wind, and that's it. And so there is, as you have mentioned, the Chinese may have somewhat a chaotic nomenclature, but they definitely have a hierarchy of energies, and Gurdjieff probably has developed the most sophisticated, to me, group and named group of energies of how they're refined in the body, calling hydrogens, and you refine things up at a further level. So that's a helpful system for me, or a helpful concept or model to try to understand better how these energies work, because in Vajrayana we just don't contemplate it that way. And subsequently, people don't, the great deficit is that not having accumulated this thickened and this pressurized qi, and not being able to fill the body because it's not there, it's not pressurized, hasn't been accumulated. We haven't got the gas. We haven't got the gas tank, the containment field, which you call the lower dantian, and so therefore the movement of energy is really more on the level of, and not to put it down, but imagination. Not that imagination isn't a force. I mean, obviously, when you imagine something, it has some power. But I realize it has a lot less power than I thought. It's a sensitivity. As you mentioned, I developed, as a healer, I developed I think, excellent sensitivity to other people's energy field or any energy fields. I have an exquisite sensitivity to that. But woe unto me, I realize that is not at all the same as developing, I would call it a biological chi, a physical, material substance in the body that flows. So I have seen really wonderful, like Kala Rinpoche, but I've seen other really great masters of Salung, yogas, and so on and so forth. I don't know of any of them, and none have ever said so, including in 3-year retreat, we did 3 different kinds of Salung movements, very famous ones, but nobody ever talked about the experience of the energy in the body.
No one talked about what it actually feels like, or what it does?
What it feels like.
Right, okay. Yeah.
I've never heard any, we are definitely not taught, and it is not in the literature, and I know it's not in any oral teaching. I'm quite sure of that. Nobody goes like, well, when you put your arm here, this will make the chi and you'll feel it. No.
Right.
So and some of them, a lot of them have very poetic names. So it doesn't help at all. Flapping the vulture's wings or something. And some of them might say opening the channels, or collecting the chi, or opening the central channel. But so we don't know what is that mechanism when I go like this. Why is that? To be
fair, it's not that much different in China. To be honest, when you're studying with the Chinese teachers, there's not that much instruction. It's do this, do that, do this. Very hit and miss as to whether it works. Yeah, it's funny actually. Bringing you back to this, like that section I read. It's funny that how similar it is to our chemical writings for anything, like activating the channels or fire and water mixing or something like that. Like even the wording is very similar. To my heathen ear, even the kind of rhythm within the way that it's written is very, very similar. But the difference, I think it's funny that like. Within Taoism, it would not be seen as a visualization or something to repeat. It would be a set of a set of confirmations that you're going in the right direction, which I think is interesting that you can have, do you know what I mean, 2 minutes so different takes on it. Yeah. But I guess, there's literary Taoists that would recite sections of the classics, but they're not normally within alchemy. They're more within sort of religious Taoism or something, usually.
A large part of Vajrayana, certainly all the deity meditation, is a fake it till you make it. 100%. So now I am a deity, I'm in this color, and I'm made of light, I have a body of light, and so on and so forth. And you just keep doing that and believing that, because that's that's the most difficult. It's one thing to say, okay, I have a red body, and so now you're supposed to have the identity as well. And I have the sound of the deity. All sound is the sound of the deity. All form is the deity's pure realm. And now I have to be convinced that this is my real identity.
Right. Okay.
That's kind of a leap, a philosophical, or you could say psychological leap. That's not, that's jumping.
Quite a big leap.
That's like jumping over your own feet. Like, now I'm absolutely convinced. Does that mean I couldn't even be delusional if I try to be delusional? It's hard, right?
Right.
I think I'm really Napoleon. I'm really I'm not convinced.
It sounds like a very difficult. Well, certainly for me, that would be a very difficult leap. It would be hard for me to do because no matter how much of my, intention I could convince of that thing, there'd be other side of my brain going, nah, you're still a schmuck, you're Damo. That would be kind of tricky. Well, how do you get over that? How do you get over that hurdle?
Well, again, the fake it till you make it aspect is. It's actually embedded in the practices themselves, because the core of it is generation stage and completion. Generation, you visualize, they call you're generating it, and then you're inviting the wisdom being, the Yeshe-Pa, the Jnana Sattva, to enter into you. So when you do the visualization, you actually go, okay, I visualize myself, now I'm requesting the actual energetic being to enter into me, and you visualize that again.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
And the concept is, if you do that enough, one day it does show up. But there's many problems with that. One of the ones that I found over the many years is that if it does show up, and we're not really told that, if it does show up, it's not going to be anything like you visualized.
Okay.
It's like, oh, I can't wait to get to Bali. I've read all the books, and then you come to Bali. Oh, what is this place?
Sure.
This is nothing like, wanting to meet someone, then you meet them in person. Oh, that person's a jerk. I thought they were amazing. You know?
Okay.
I'd like to talk to that beautiful girl, and you talk about, oh my God.
Yeah, sure.
It's all our expectations. So we're not quite told. I guess they don't want to break the bubble. Those that know that when you do encounter those kind of, I'll call them archetypal. I'm sure people hate me saying that, but archetypal forces, universal forces, they will look and feel quite different.
Why would they not like you saying that? Out of curiosity, to say that a deity is an archetype, it's not literal enough, personified enough?
Yeah, that's another whole problem. In the why Vajrayana fails. Not that Vajrayana is a failure, but there's falling down spots. One of the falling down spots is Westerners have, even though they want to be an Easterner, like having spent a lot of time in Bhutan, and I know their belief system, and I know how deeply embedded that is, and there's no doubt in their minds. But for a Westerner, they've got to say, well, because this is a very shamanic. I mean, Buddhism has tantra, it has monastic, and it has shamanism mushed together, and meditation, and probably a few other things. But there's a tremendous amount of shamanism in here, and some people who practice this and teach this want to tell you, they just can't wait to tell you, oh yes, that's all those demons are a projection of your mind. Okay. Have you been doing this practice? If you're doing this practice, trust me, you will go, as a shaman, you go into other realms. It's not a problem. You want to meet other entities, the universe is full of all kinds of stuff, and you can encounter them. So they want to rationalize Buddhism, and their Western rational mind has difficulty to say that, even to say that a yidam, that a meditational deity is a force, is an existent force. Now, whether that force is has primacy, is a primal force, archetype within the universe, or whether it was created by enlightened minds, which I really believe that they create fields, energy fields or pure realms. Enough enlightened people, some of the ones I've met, like Kala Rinpoche, I used to say everywhere he walks, he's literally, there's a wave of 5-element purity. It's like walking on water, like seeing this ripple. You can see this ripple in the fabric of reality. So yes, I'm sure they can produce pure realms and archetypal forms, and that's why you're so connected to the lineage and to the guru, because in some ways they're the conduit, which is very different, I think.
But they're not that's not the current Kali Rinpoche, that's the one that passed away.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I won't say the real Kali, but the original ones.
When did he pass away?
In 1989, when I was in 3-year retreat.
Oh, okay.
I was still in there.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So with
what was I saying?
There's something I've seen with Westerners, though.
Oh yeah. So that's why because their rationality, to say that to go into that arena, a lot of people actually still feel that might be superstitious. They want to psychologize it.
Right.
That that's just like it's a way to work out your fears by pretending there's these demons, or to materialize or rationalize your issues as a demon. Make your anger into a demon, and then you go, no, they're real demons. So that's, as I say, you're much more oriented in the whole of Vajrayana. You're much more oriented towards this interaction with enlightened forces, with dark forces, light forces, and much less so, with developing an internal organized energetic system. Well, I always said with the yidam, in my mind, and I don't know if it jives with your knowledge, but it's like taking the diffuse photonic light, it's like a light bulb diffusing in all directions, and we're trying to make a laser beam. We're trying to make congruent light, which has some organized structure to it. And I still believe that's true, but having now practiced enough of Nei Dan and Qigong to have some opinion, we certainly are deficient in the methodology to build that kind of structure that can transform and make congruent light, congruent magnetism, congruent electricity, etc., or to refine energies. We're very deficient in that regard. We don't do the basics. We have a lot of very sophisticated techniques that probably most practitioners, not that they shouldn't be doing it, it's not necessarily going to hurt them, but they'll never get anywhere. I've said to many, many people, Vajrayana has an incredible, tricked out Cadillac with all the fixins, but no gas and no gas tank.
Right.
So you can sit there and imagine you're driving. You can visualize that you're driving, but you're actually not moving the car.
How long?
Vajrayanists will never know that
Yeah.
until they study something like that. They'll think that's an outrageous concept. They'll say, well, we have bumcha. We hold our breath like this, and we hold in the energy.
Okay.
Not the same. It's not the same. As you mentioned, it's like, do that, and you probably got 10 different leaks springing here and there.
Is there no discussion of these things?
Pardon?
No discussion of leakages or anything like that?
Never. No, never.
Okay.
Yeah, and there, we know there's such a thing as lung sickness, of air sickness, or deviations, you call them. But again, it's very, I could say basic or be unkind and say primitive, in that there's no real remedy for it, and there's no differentiation. It's like, oh yeah, you got this tremendous pain. We used to say, it just went up the wrong way. You do these practices, and then instead of going in this channel, and now you got those toothaches and those headaches, and et cetera, or whatever, or you go crazy. But there's very little remedy for it, because anything you do increases your lung, right? So you can't really do practices to mitigate your lung, because whatever
once there's an issue, there's an issue.
Yeah. Except, being empty. And so that's a solution. But if you could do that, then you wouldn't have had the lung in the first place, if you could, pong.
So was this like, so when you did your training in the beginning from the 80s, right?
Yeah.
I believe, the 80s?
86 to 89 was a 3-year retreat.
86 to 89. So what do you start with? Do you start with any energetic practice, or is it more straight into kind of mind purification? Or
yeah, there's a very set curriculum. And that curriculum actually didn't really come about till, I think, the 1700s. And in the old days, really, from everything we know, and it probably still happens, you meet a teacher and he gives you the practice,
right?
Deity and so on, and you go ahead. But then it became a curriculum, particularly because of the monastic situation, and in 3 years, which is supposed to be the exact number of breaths that you could transform yourself and so on. So you start with calm abiding. Then you start with latong, or insight meditation, and then you do these preparatory purification exercises, which is physical. You do the physical prostrations, and then counting purification mantras and a mandala offering. I mean, they all make logical sense, and they definitely, karma is very big in our system. So definitely you're purifying karma. There's no question. It's very effective in that way of purifying material. Is excellent in that regard, but you're still never taught how to build that energy, other than focus on your navel.
Sure. Is this not what the Tummo is about? Is that the sort of method of building it, though?
Yeah, basically the method of Tummo. Yeah, there's other preparations with the yidam practice and so on, and you're learning to meditate in the body somewhat. Again, I think in all of these arts, maybe even in your systems, there's not enough, well, maybe there's not enough emphasis just on body sensitivity, just on being present in your body. I think the way you teach it, yes. But that's definitely not much of it. There's a hollow body practice.
Right.
So you do practice it. But hollow body is not quite the same as just sensing the energy field, just listening. It's not quite the same.
So if we're honest, what you're saying here, you're talking about sort of, I don't know, errors or flaws that you're seeing overall in the system. But is this the same for Westerners as Asians? I mean, because you spend enough time in Bhutan and Nepal and Tibet, is it the same in your opinion across Easterners as well?
That is a very good point. In my personal opinion, and 40 years in these systems,
I think it's enough years to have an opinion, surely.
Yeah, that's right. Whether it's right or wrong, I've got one.
It's like only 2 years less than I've been alive.
Definitely,
2 years more.
Definitely, there's we're in the early stages. Yeah. They say it took even to go for Buddhism to come into Tibet with hundreds of translators and practitioners on took several hundred years. So we're still in the very early stages, but there's no question there is a lack of congruence between the Eastern mind and actually, when I came out of 3-year retreat, one of my takeaways was, okay, I've been putting this square peg of 11th century Buddhism, and it is 11th century. Absolutely, it's 100% 11th century. Even today, everything you're doing is 11th century or before. Even though practices might have been done in the 70s, same template. That's what I mean. Into a whole of a kid who grew up with, I'm older, but still grew up with phones and TVs and whatever people had, skateboards. So that configuration is quite different. And well, again, it's very, I don't know what your opinion is on this, it'd be fascinating. But when I came out of retreat, I had expected fashion would change, different things like that. But what I did not expect is what I definitely, specifically perceived, accurately perceived, that the architecture of mind had changed.
The shape of the culture.
Shape. I thought the content would change, but everything else would be the same. No, the architecture of the world, the shape of the world, and the shape of mind had changed. I had been sitting in there, our minds didn't change. But the world, the configuration of the world had changed. My square peg was still a 3-year ago square peg, and the world was a slightly different peg. It's an extraordinary thing. I guess the universe evolves some way. But that is the problem, that in a profound way, it's not just different context or different culture. People say, it's the Tibetan culture is in the way. No, it's not the culture. There's a whole configuration of understanding, of perceiving, of experiencing that has not been upgraded. I don't know anyone who's upgraded it. I mean, there might be modern teachers who think they're upgrading it. I have not met the upgraded teacher.
But this is what
there's some good teachers, but they're still not upgraded from a West. That upgrade has to be done by a Westerner. Never, and that's a whole other thing, because any Tibetan would resist that statement. They are still the purveyors of this whole thing, and they own it, right? That has to be. We're the lungfish. We're the fish that first come out onto dry land. The Westerners. It has to be. There has to be some realized Westerners, or at least developed to a certain point where they can say, hey, which is what I really believe you have done, and I have so much respect for within your system. You've absorbed that Chinese system, you've digested it, and now you're able to vomit it out for us. You're able to display it for us in a way that you have filtered it through your Western understandings and so on, by your efforts and by your work and by your experience. So we need Westerners who have so absorbed this thing that they can now say, you know what, this has to be modified this way. And of course, that's heresy to even say that, because Eastern systems, especially Buddhism, it's extraordinarily rigid. You cannot deviate from the system, and for some good reasons, of course. But on the other hand, as I say, that balance between dogma and dharma, which is truth, dharma always wins. But of course, who really has the dharma? If you really have the dharma, you throw all these texts out. These texts are nothing compared to an enlightened being. But who is going to stand there and say, I have correct information? Well, someone who really does. And that means they're not a charlatan, they're not a fake, they're not a liar. They really have. And I have maybe, a couple of little things that I could throw in and say, this needs to change. I'm still probably in the stage where I know there's a lot wrong, and I can identify, I can diagnose it, but I can't necessarily cure it yet. But and you're probably on the same journey. You're learning more and more how to make this work for other people in the way that it has worked for you, because you've gone through all the terrible sufferings and dead ends and down the garden path.
Well, I'm at the point of arguing with dogma at the moment, which is where I've hit, which isn't necessarily making me very popular. But I always think that culture is always the same, and I don't think society or culture is any different from a spiritual tradition or a religion like Vajrayana or whatever. Is that what you have within any large group of people, from what I can see, is 99% conformists, essentially, that follow the status quo and do what they're supposed to do. And the same within Taoism, or the same within Vajrayana, from my limited understanding. And I think they have their purpose. Those people are the historians. They are the preservers of it. They are the ones that kind of maintain the core of the tradition. But you always then have those people on the fringe that are kind of, they have one foot in the dogma and one foot not, that are a bit more experimental, and they're a bit more creative, and they're a bit more playing with it. Now the problem is, those people on the fringe, at least 2/3 of them are deluded and complete lunatics. And to be honest, they're better off being in the dogma. But then some people within that fringe actually have enough of a taste of how the damn thing works to then take their creativity and kind of advance it. And that's how the art develops. But the problem is that if you're on the fringe, which I have a feeling we both might be within that category within our own traditions, we always like to think we're the ones that aren't the lunatics. Do you know what I mean? But somewhere amongst all of the lunatics, there will be some creative individuals that will then step it further into the future, you know.
Well, the proof is in the pudding, and in your case, the proof is in the impact that you have on your students and them getting actual results beyond what would normally accrue from getting just pathetic teachings. So, you know, that's a validation of what you're doing for sure. I can't necessarily say the same, but maybe we'll get there.
No, I mean, the dogma types will always try to resist.
Yeah.
But
well,
I see.
When my current books get out there, then that might have some impact, and of course make me even more of a fringe person. But no, I'm doing like yourself. I'm just doing my best to help, and I can't help but be true to my perception. You know, if I perceive it to be that way, Dharma wins out. I can't help but go that way.
So on your 3-year retreat then, let me ask you about that.
Okay, am I on yet?
Yeah, because I think that's something that not only have most people even considered doing, but obviously beyond what most people could do. Like beyond what they could dream of. Even on a practical level, it'd be difficult, but certainly on a psychological level as well. Yes. So you had this 3 years, 3 months, and during that time, are there certain things you're taught that you're not taught outside of the retreat? Or is it only that you have the same things, but you have more time to practice it?
No, it definitely at that time.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in, right? Because I'm assuming that this situation has changed. So maybe you could explain that.
It's very, of course, it's disturbing, not, you know, profoundly disturbing, but it's a significant issue to me. It's problematic that all of those secret teachings, the 6 yogas, the only way that I could learn the 6 yogas was in 3-year retreat. That was the only way at that time.
Was that
though that's not true. Maybe certain rare teachers had some Western students scattered that they would, but Kala Rinpoche was really the first. Maybe Dujin Rinpoche was doing it too, but he certainly was the first to bring this to such a widespread area, and putting Westerners in 3-year retreats in Europe and then in America. And he got tremendous flack from it, from the Tibet. I mean, really serious
for taking Westerners.
Oh yes,
right.
You know, the infidels, the great unwashed, and still barbarians, and still Mutekpas, and still that is I'd say a prevailing attitude. That is a prevailing there's a prevailing bigotry within Vajrayana against white people. No question. Anyone who doesn't know that has not been around long enough, and they have not traveled enough, and they don't speak the language. So I can hear the conversation. I know the conversation. I know the story, and I know, if you've been around long enough, you know all the things that have happened that verify this and that. And the white people European people have definitely not been given the responsibility levels that they should have, considering some have been in it for 30 or 40 years. They're considered to still be the underlings, and we still manufacture and export llamas in Asia. We export them to the West. We don't want the Westerners to take, and I've heard that outright statement. We don't want the Westerners to start taking this thing. Oh, it would be so. This is young tulkus, young high up Rinpoches in Nepal and so on. Oh, we couldn't have that. That the Westerners start, being empowered.
Okay.
So that's a whole thing. But what are you saying about
but they're clearly teaching some of the 6 yogas more publicly than they did before.
That's all being taught in a public way.
Because Tummo, for example, was one of these, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, there's a big workshop going on online. Maybe right now, maybe this last weekend, by I won't mention the teacher, who I like him, he's a nice guy, but to me it's absolutely outrageous that they're teaching that. It's absurd. It's absurd on many levels, because it's not just fantastical, it's delusional that you think you will get results. I do not know, and I was actually just talking to Ian Baker about that. I do not know of one Westerner, I've not heard of one Westerner that have had results with Tummo.
Okay.
Maybe I heard a rumor of maybe somebody heard of somebody in France did something. But certainly to say that there is any reasonable, to say that there's anybody, maybe there's somebody. But generally, there might be a very rare person, but it is not widespread, it is not common. It would be extremely rare and almost unheard of.
So, okay, let's break that down. So,
you wouldn't say to someone, hey, well, how's your Tummo doing? You took that course. How's it going with you? You're feeling heat, whatever that. I mean,
so what would be considered results? What would be, in Tummo, what would be considered like to have done it, managed it, got success at it?
Well, certainly
most people would assume sweating and heat, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, no, the idea is the descent and the arising of the four blisses.
Sure.
As the drops come down through the different centers, then one has different levels of experiences, awareness, transformations. We don't really know because, again, it's all couched in traditional literature. So, again, I don't have an account myself where a Westerner said, here's what you're really going to feel. And they say these lights and these fireflies, and you'll see this and that, and you'll see. Here's what really went on. Now, did they say that because they were just having a nyam, which we call meditative experience, a flash in a pan, or did they have a real transformative experience? So I haven't heard that story. So I can't say, and I haven't had that experience myself yet. So I can't really say what will happen. But they're supposed to experience those going down and going back up.
Right, okay.
And
why aren't the Westerners getting it?
Well, it's the same issue. Why aren't they getting it? Number one.
Are the Asianers getting it? Difficult question.
Extremely rare.
Okay, right.
Extremely rare, and if they do get it, why do they get it and the Westerners don't? And it's still a small percentage. Okay. Why? Their machinery is built quite differently. And their mind is built quite differently. And the techniques have to be modified appropriately, but who's going to do that?
Right,
The Tibetans, Bhutanese, Nepalese, whatever, they seem to have tremendous trouble putting themselves in someone else's shoes that is of a different makeup. It's not being done successfully.
So what's the difference? What's the difference in makeup? Because I don't disagree with you, actually, but I'm curious what your opinion is.
And I haven't answered your other question yet.
On the difference in makeup. No, I know, but this is too interesting. What is the difference? Maybe physiologically, psychologically, subtle body?
Yeah, all of those.
What is it? Certainly have a different taste in food, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. I would... here's racism for you. Sorry, folks. The utter profound stupidity. I can't call it even ignorance. Stupidity that you do not think that different races who have different genetic makeup do not have different energy fields.
Okay,
and
sure.
It's not racism to say that people are different. It's because it's not negative. And racism has come to mean you're saying there's a difference.
Yeah.
Black and white are the same. Really? The pigment is the same as no pigment. Really? Racism originally meant something pejorative. You had some negative attitudes towards some whole race. Yeah. It didn't mean that you recognize that French or Germans or Germans, or now it's come to mean this absurd, idiotic, meaningless nothing. So yes, they have a different energetic field, a different organization of their energy, a different configuration. I'm sure they process energies differently. I can't give you all the specifics, but even looking at them or talking to them, I know they process language differently.
Sure.
They have different understandings. It's like you go to some countries and you tell a really funny joke.
Yeah.
And they just like that. What?
Well, that's like when I teach in America.
No, your jokes are funny. Your jokes are funny. But, there's... I've heard even from comedians, like they go to Russia, and all of their funniest jokes in America, everyone just straight-faced. That's because they're processing linguistics and energy and information. Energy and information go together, right? Okay. Whatever there's energy, there's information. It's impossible to have energy without information. There's these theories of some scientists, physicists, that the whole universe is just information. Well, that's not true. It's just information and energy. So there's a different configuration, and that has not been adapted to. But even then, the Easterners, the Tibetans, and I'll say that not the Bhutanese Tibetan, I'm lumping them together, the Himalayans, from the beginning, their approach, quite different from India, but some similarity, but their forte is codifying and holding on to the tradition in an extraordinary way. They're just beautiful at organizing it, structuring it, and here it is. Don't touch it. And they maintain that. And yes, there's been adaptations for the next generation, whatever, which means you have a puja, which is, 10% different than what it was before. You have come up with your own realization, but the format's the same. It's the same package. I'm sorry, it's the same luggage. So we have not had a radical transformation in that understanding yet.
Is it doable? Is it adaptable, do you think? Or would it result in a completely different practice altogether? Or is it like a subtle
I'm
shift?
an example that it is possible, but at the same time, nobody wants to know from me.
Right, okay, sure.
If there's enough people who make a change, that has to do with, I always say, why is it the human beings base, well, I know why, it's animal behavior. They base their judgments on popularity rather than quality. Like, wow, he's got 50 million likes on Twitter. Doesn't mean he's not an idiot. What are you talking about? That even when you read a book, you sold more books. Who cares how many books? Is it a good book? Nobody sold more books than anyone else.
Okay.
So there's the human issue of status and then popularity. Say I have some of the greatest concepts on certain areas in the world.
Yes.
That doesn't mean anyone's running to see. How do they know that? And how would they judge that? And how would they find out that? Even if I told them, maybe they'll go to some wacko person in Ubud.
Sure.
So it's
that's
an issue, and that's an issue of vibration and energy and so on. And the students come to you because they're attracted to you, right?
Yep.
And same thing with my healing practice. I've always known that if I just change my mindset and I want to see more patients, I'll get 20 more patients.
Okay.
So that's for this new information to come through and then be accepted. That's almost two different issues, right?
Right. Okay.
I don't know what the what do you call it? Not the cutoff point. What the groundswell point is, or what the critical mass is. That's the word the critical mass, where suddenly people go, "Oh, wow, this is a cool thing," and this if we do it this way. And maybe it'll be one teacher that becomes popular in that way, etc., etc.
But there's no shortage of Westerners that have changed things.
Well, not.
I mean, you can find, if not being a Tummo practitioner, I'm sure I could go online and find probably 50 different versions of Tummo from 50 different Westerners.
It's fairly the same, and it's all truncated, or it's all from people who have not accomplished Tummo. That's the main thing. I mean, you can read from the same books, and the same mystery. It's like my talk I just gave on chakras, right?
Yeah.
Chakras. All of this New Age chakra system, all is based on one wrong translation of a text that was a secondary text anyway, that was a piece of a larger text. And so it's, broken telephone. It had so many missing ingredients down to, and that became accepted as the reality when it's just a mishmash. And then, of course, all the additions that were made. You can read that book called Rainbow Body, though it's not about Rainbow Body, about the history of the Western chakra system. It's an incredible indictment, actually, against human belief systems as a whole. When you see how this thing was tagged together over a 104-year period till it was rebirthed totally, I think in 1977, it was full-blown as it is today. And it was just a bunch of whack jobs, mainly, adding to it. And I have got some psychological, let's make it a rainbow system. Oh, the chakras are rainbow colors. No, they aren't, and they never have been. And why would they be? Why would this one be red and this one's orange and this one's blue and purple? That's absurd. It's bizarre. And it's not traditional, but some color therapists went. And if only people knew that. Did you know that, as I said in my lecture...
And yet I've seen that color system adopted by Asia, because I've been back in Asia and seen the artwork and things. But you're saying that's not traditional?
There's 90% of Eastern teachers, including, what's his name, Guru? what's his name now? Guru?
Some guru.
Yeah, some guru, what his name is. 90% of them are just regurgitating that same wrong system based on serpent power, based on Western teaching.
Right,
It's horrifying, it's frustrating. What are you going to do?
So what is the classical view of the chakra then?
The
original, like before it got distorted into, because I presume the 7, the 7 is a change, you mean, as well?
Well, 7 is incorrect anyway. Yes. There were multiple different systems. 5 was always the traditional system because it's based on the 5 elements.
Yeah.
And that same Kujika Tantra, from which they extracted the 6 element tradition of serpent power, which then Blavatsky added the 7th.
Okay.
But in that same text was another section, it's 2 sections, which has the 5 element system. And there's a whole, it's been completely translated into English, and you can buy it, the 5 element system of the Kujika Tantra. So the 5 element one was traditional. The 6 element one is problematical anyway, because in order to fit it, and actually the 6 element one is there because you're installing 6 different deities. That's the only reason it exists. And so I had the question for so long, why is it in the Hindu system, or the accepted Hindu system, the New Age Tantra system, that now, instead of air being in the throat, wind element in the throat, where it makes sense, you know, air, movement, motility, energy, expression, now suddenly space element is there. And then now air's in the heart, and then fire's now in the abdomen. Wait a minute, that's where water's... Why? Well, we had to fit them in with the 6. That's the only reason that's down, because in that system, you're actually not working on the elements at all. You're not doing space element in the throat. You're not doing space. You're not doing air element in the heart. You're installing deities in there. It's hysterically funny. And the other hysterically funny thing I found, which I didn't have time to say in that lecture, was in the 6 element system, it is all male deities. And the 5 elements, female deities. So all of these yoginis running around doing this thing and not realizing this practice does not even have any female deities in your chakras.
So how do you define a chakra? Because obviously that's something that chakra is something people will hear about a lot. People ask me about chakras all the time. Are they the same as the dantian? Which obviously not. That's a complete incorrection. But I'm always interested in people's definition of them. What would be the traditional one then, for example, if not your own opinion?
Oh, traditional one.
How would they define it prior to it becoming 7 rainbow colors and switching the elements around?
Well, they would say, of course, they didn't define it as being a nexus of nerves, the premovascular system, of biophotonic matrix, or field, which is really a field, electromagnetic or photonic, etc. field, or maybe dark energy field. But they would just describe it as a dwelling place of the seed syllable, the lotus where the seed syllable and the deity sits. And actually, the original tradition is phonic. It is the 50 Sanskrit elements. And again, that's another huge deficit to me in Tibetan Buddhism, is I know they're Mantrayana. Matter of fact, it's called Mantrayana. Or it's actually, that's a takeoff on the original Hindu, which is mantra, marga. So they just kind of copied it. But yana meaning path. But even though they consider themselves mantrasists, Mantrayanists, they do mantras like this.
I heard the
as
mumbling.
Opposed to the way you're supposed to do it of, actually having a sonic vibration in your body. And from early on in my mantra practice, I went, well, why don't they place the mantras in different places in the body? Why wouldn't you go, because there's something called toning that was going on in the 60s. Like, why wouldn't you go, or even when I did voice training, you say, okay, do your voice, now put it 2 miles behind you, 2 miles in front of you, and a completely different experience and feeling. But we never, in Vajrayana, they don't have that kind of internal experiential situation. And also, there's a wonderful investigator, Chris Tompkins, who is the first one to discover the original phonic sounds that were in the chakras and the way they used them. And still, I believe that that's what we should be doing in Vajrayana, is having Sanskrit seed syllables, the 10 in each chakra, and then it should be sounded out in different ways, etc. And then they would have a sonic effect on the body. But coming back to the problems of Tummo, it's circular, is the greatest failing of Vajrayana is not embodying energy and learning to corral and contain energy so that it can fuel even that visualization. I know you ain't into it, but I think the mantra and the deity visualization could be so much more full and empowered and extraordinary if it was fueled by that kind of wisdom energy within the body. So I do believe that it's something that you had mentioned on the weekend that happens in Qigong too, but I believe most people in Vajrayana are doing practices that are 10 or 20 years or maybe light years ahead of where they are and what they should be doing.
Okay,
You're not ready to do yidam practice. Do this for 5 years, then maybe. And do that for 5 years, then maybe Tummo after 15 years, if you pass the test and we know you. But that's not what happens. You can do it online. And so that's not only a waste of time, because you can do your Tummo for 20 years and you'll just get heat. You'll just get some heat in the body. I mean, you can generate adrenal energy, or you can you can generate jump up and down. You'll generate energy. So that not only wastes time, but then people have a wrong fixed conception and they never realize what's missing. I only credit myself with I knew something's missing, and that's my great genius. Is after 20 years, that's still something missing. And then I found Damo. No, literally, for me, you're the first person who I saw, and I said, he's got the damn missing pieces that I want. That's what happened. That's why I began doing your courses. Now, you ain't the only one, I'm sure, but I recognize that within your tradition, there are those technologies that do not, I'm sorry, they do not exist anywhere in Buddhism, nowhere. Now, maybe somewhere, in the corner of Chan Buddhism, maybe they've got it somewhere.
Tucked away.
But, tucked away. Yeah. But within Vajrayana, I do not believe it's at the level. Actually, I found out after many years in practice, hey, there's a level that they teach the monks, there's a level they teach the Rinpoche, there's a level they teach the tulkus, and then there's another level.
Right, okay.
So even the tulkus, they're not getting it. So I know that in 3-year retreat, we were not getting there were a lot of missing pieces.
Okay, sure.
And it's a shame, but...
and that was known by the people that were teaching you, you think, that there was missing pieces? It wasn't that they missed them themselves?
On some level, yeah. Right, on the higher levels, they know. It's like the government. Yeah, somebody knows.
Sure, okay.
Maybe the school officials or down, the administrators down there, they're just puppets.
Right,
but somebody who's pulling the string, they know that that's baloney, or they know what they're doing. Or they
Seems a little unfair if someone's committed to a 3-year, 3-month. I mean, that's a hell of a commitment.
Well, actually, when I got at the 3-year retreat, my main experience was, we have a remedy in homeopathy. I'm a homeopath. Called Staphysagria, and its keynote is for righteous indignation. I needed that remedy a lot after. I had righteous indignation. I did feel ripped off.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was very angry.
Did you realize?
I was angry for years.
Did you realize that during?
I was really angry at my teacher too for years.
Okay.
Because I did feel betrayed and abandoned by the tradition.
Way?
Well, by our lama that was supposed to be there on site, and by the teachings being so incomplete and not the questions not being answered when they're direct. Asking a direct question, like, what about this and this? And I don't mean just because, that's how the tradition is, but I would say, negligence or, it's a cavalier thing.
Okay.
Just get in there and do the practice. Yeah, I'm sure you've experienced. Just do the practice and forget about that, whatever. That's too bad. Just do it. That's a tradition, man. Just do it. Hey, this is Chicago. This is Chinatown, man.
Sure. Is this a common? I'm curious about this. Is this a common complaint from people who've done the longer retreats? Because I've not known. I have met one other person who's done it, but not. I don't know that many people who've done these kind of lengthy retreats.
I know people who've done
Vajrayana.
I know people who've done 3-year retreat and done double 3-year retreat that are assholes.
Right. Okay.
So, and that's what gets into a whole other issue. Is why is Vajrayana not changing the personality.
Well, neither does Taoism.
And yeah,
that's the
so
same.
that's there's an answer to all those things too. But
Right.
I would say there's quite a few people that have been, not necessarily 3-year retreat, but been in this game a long time that are quite disillusioned. Matter of fact, after my 3-year retreat, one guy completely abandoned it, went into Vipassana, I'm very happy in Vipassana. Another one person gave it up 100%, and one guy went into Taoism 100%.
Okay, right.
Another person tried to commit suicide. There are a lot of stories.
Yeah, okay.
So that's a failing too. Well, that's another thing that happens at a 3-year retreat. There's no, what do they call that? Debriefing.
Yeah, sure.
You're
yeah, I would imagine you need like a rehabilitation phase. Maybe
yeah.
I assume that's what the last 3 months were for. 3 years and then 3 months rehabilitation.
No, the whole thing was not, and there should have been group therapy for that matter.
Right, okay.
Can you imagine locking 10 men up for 3 years and you never have sit-down powwows together, like a men's group, which it could be very healthy, where people can be honest and say, I don't know if it's me, but you're doing this thing that's really irritating or whatever, or I'm getting angry or whatever. Okay, it's called a relationship. You talk it through, you see what's going on, and you learn about yourself, But we didn't have that, so we just had conflicts. And in some of the other 3-year retreats, they had, fist fights, and we didn't quite get to that. Though one guy did. One guy had been he was a black gentleman. He had been a Green Beret. He did chase me around. He had gained a lot of weight, luckily, but he did chase me around. If he would have caught me, he probably would have Green Bereted me into the ground. But yeah, he did chase me. I was not that popular in there because my Tibetan was much better than anybody, and I probably was. I don't think I was very critical, but when people were doing things completely wrong, this is how we do it. So I don't know if that was a reason, but you get a lot of conflicts. I also had better stuff than anybody. I had Tibetan rugs and stuff. I'd been a doctor, so I had some cool stuff.
Right. Okay.
And mainly I was in there with blue collar guys. So again, I call it reverse discrimination. I'd never experienced that before. That rich guy with the nice.
It sounds like chaos. It sounds like complete chaos.
It was hell.
How many people were there?
It was quite hellish. It was 10 men, and we finished with 8, I think, 8 or 7.
Is it still really common practice for Vajrayana in the West for people to do these 3-year retreats?
I think it's still going on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if it was ever that popular. You get 10 people, 20 people, and it's 3 years, so it's not like they're cranking out a lot of them. But now everybody can wear these nakpazens, which you're only supposed to wear when you've accomplished. I shouldn't even be wearing one. You're only supposed to wear one when you've really accomplished something. Okay. But now, as soon as you join the club, now you're wearing the nakpazen. It's horrible. I'm glad I'm not a Buddhist.
You're not a Buddhist anymore?
I'm just kidding. I don't know. Am I supposed to be one?
I don't know. What do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself Buddhist or?
No, not really. No, because I don't consider that I represent. I don't want to be, even though I write these books, I'm not representing that I'm part of a lineage or I'm this lineage, because that wouldn't be fair to the lineage, because I don't think I'm being true to the lineage. I'm being true to what I learned.
Okay, sure.
So in that sense, am I a Buddhist? I don't know. I'm a human being trying to achieve some level of wisdom with the time I have here and benefit other beings if I can. That's it. So I don't know. What is that?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I don't call myself,
I don't really want to belong
at all.
As W.C. Field says, I don't want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member.
So what's the future for Asa then? Now that you've...
We haven't finished trashing Tibetan Buddhism yet.
Do you feel you want to more?
No. Well, yes, I want to constructively criticize it, wake some people up. But they're not going to all start adopting Qigong tomorrow, but maybe after I post something on Facebook. But no, when my books come out over the next year, then that'll be my contribution in this life, because Vajrayana has given me some very valuable, a lot of valuable material, insights, changes. One of them being the understanding of the 5 elements, which is key to my being, and I think it's a wonderful form of psychology for people to live with day to day, and even on a spiritual level, it's quite useful. Understanding those five forces. Again, that's one of the problems in all of these spiritual systems. Is they don't differentiate energies, especially in Tibetan Buddhism. They just have the one block of energy. And so having at least different qualities of energies, 5 different qualities, and maybe even different levels of energies, then that's internal guidance that could be quite helpful. If you can recognize them in yourself, oh, I'm in an earth element state, or I'm working with air element or fire. It's very useful, and yeah, a lot of people pick up on it. And you know, it's not. I've been doing that for 20 or 30 years.
Yes.
But and so there's a certain popularity out there, but a lot of the information is very superficial, and a lot of it's wrong. So that's where I hope my books will come in and correct that. So that's where I'm going with that material. And you know, the energy healing part is important too, even though I understand it better through you than I did before of what it's the real nature of energy work.
Do you feel there's a possible blend then between Vajrayana and Taoist practice, alchemical work? Or more clashes or more blends?
I think it's essential. I think it's absolutely essential. Okay. It's not essential for Taoists necessarily, but it is essential for Tibetan Buddhism. Absolutely the only way forward. Okay. Because eventually, if it continues to just be unsuccessful, it will become more and more just a shallow, superficial way of life or culturalism, and it will cease to be the religion it was meant to be, or the transformative vehicle it was meant to be. And as I say, I've seen many people fall away that shouldn't have, just because there's inconsistencies and there's inaccuracies and so on and so forth. So yes, to me, the real way forward of the redemption of Tibetan Buddhism is through integrating the energy techniques of Taoism. That is absolute certainty. That's not my opinion. That's a certainty. I know that for a fact. I know that internally, and I know that from the experience of the two. And people can accept that or not, but there ain't no other way. There's just simply no other way. If you do not have gas in a gas tank, you will not have results with what they call the completion stage practices, the 6 yogas, Tummo, or dream yoga, or any of those other techniques which require internal transformation. And I don't see how you're going to get a light body. That's the main thing. And
this is something that's interesting, right? Light body, rainbow body, like ascendance, immortality within Taoism or something, right? Why? This is my thought. Is obviously very few people are achieving such things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why is that not more accepted within a tradition? Because it seems to me to be sensible that if a tradition, unless they go down the route of saying all those things are metaphors and they're not real, which some people do, but if they accept that those things are realities and that their tradition and their practice is not on the whole leading to that, then surely that's the clearest sign that there's a deficiency. They must have a rationale for why they're not achieving what they're supposed to achieve. Or do they not? I don't know.
As I'm sure you know, because you have been a healing practitioner, a doctor of Chinese medicine, etc., you can't treat a condition unless you diagnose it.
Yep.
And I would say that person is not going to even come to you unless they've already self-diagnosed. I got a pain here. That's called a self-diagnosis. Something, if they say, not a problem. I don't have a problem. You know, it's like why people don't go to psychotherapists. Well, because psychotherapists are all crazy. That's one thing. But they don't recognize a problem. I'm not a narcissist.
Sure. Okay.
I'm not a monster. So that problem is not going to be recognized by the elite, the power possessors of Vajrayana, the massive Tibetan teachers out there who are frankly. Boy, there's a lot of rigid ones. I mean, really rigid mentalities. Some of them are really wonderful, but they're really in a containment field. They're really in a containnement. And so it'd be very hard to introduce these things. And of course, there's a tremendous amount of corruption. People can love their lamas, that's great, but I'm telling you, there's a tremendous amount of corruption of, I would say, charlatan teachers, or teachers that have their personality issues are definitely in the way of their spiritual development. And I've unfortunately studied with some of those teachers who are brilliant, but financially corrupt, sexually corrupt, ethically corrupt, in many, many different ways. It's very upsetting. If people only knew what I knew. I already was pillared for not exposing some people. But if they knew what I knew...
For not exposing some people. Not for exposing people, for not exposing
people. For not exposing these people. Who am I to expose people? I don't have a smoking gun. I don't, it's for people to come forward. But, There's a lot that goes on in those corridors of power within Vajrayana.
People are people, and once they get power, then you really find out who they are. Doesn't make a difference whether they wear robes or normal clothes.
Yeah, so, to complete the answer to that question, it will have to come, as it usually does, it'll have to come from the groundswell, the populace. It'll have to come from the average practitioner. If enough of them go, you know what, maybe Asa's, what is he talking about there? I don't even know what he's talking about. I haven't got gas or a gas tank. And okay, let's have the discussion. And let's see if we can reach a new understanding of why you haven't had success for the last 10 years, or etc. Or even with your mantra work, or why is the yidam not showing up for you? Because we don't have, I don't know if we lost them. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I believe they were there, at least in a more sophisticated way, though, again, there's no question in Vajrayana, our energetic systems, 3 channels, it's obviously basic. Primitive.
Right.
I mean, look at Chinese channels and meridians, whether in medicine or in Taoism. It's very sophisticated and very, I still
think it's really crude.
But I think of Jerry Allen Johnson's books, like this thick and it's amazing diagrams and so on. We haven't got anything like that in Vajrayana.
Okay.
So that limits our fiddling around, but particularly we haven't got the simple techniques, which I told you that when I asked you to come to Bhutan, I said you're the guy that can redeem Buddhism, and you said to me, "No, you do it. I can't be bothered." You remember saying that?
Yeah. Yes.
So if I get to the point where I have some success, and I go beyond my obviously beginner level, I would like to share that. I'd love to be able to teach that somewhere down the road if I have enough life in me and enough vitality and so on. I would love to bring that into Vajrayana. I would be overjoyed, because I think it's it's tragic that people are really they have such pure intent and such intention, but it can't work. It can't work without fuel. You're not flying any machine. You're not flying a jet machine with kerosene.
What happens when the students ask the lamas or the rinpoches about such things? Because I'm not a Vajrayana practitioner. If I was in the tradition, by my nature, I'm a little bit inflammatory. I am a questioner. The monkey nature is quite strong in me. So if I was seeing, there's this rinpoches and these lamas, and these ones are dying, and they're not achieving rainbow body and not achieving light body.
And half of them have diabetes.
I would want to know. I would ask them in a polite fashion, but I want to know. Well, why aren't people achieving any more? Perhaps what we heard about in previous generations. So I would ask them, is this metaphorical, are you saying, just myth or legends, or have we lost something, or are people different, or does that question not come up? That kind of debate?
Yeah, I would, maybe it would be hypothetical for me to answer that question, but from what I've heard and what I've seen over the years, they would say, our karma is different, Western's karma sucks. And, our practitioners are not like they used to be in the old days. That's a bunch of crap. It's like blaming the patient for being, no, you didn't apply the right remedy. That's why they're not getting the results. It's not their fault that they're sick,
But they would be talking about themselves as well when they say that they don't match the old practitioners, I would assume.
I suppose, they would say this is the dark age, and this kind of nonsense. Yep. Well, maybe it is a dark age if we can't recognize our faults and then come up with some solution. Yeah, that's the dark age for sure. No, it's a very rigid and self-defeating system in that. Well, any organization, any institution, that's what happened. You look at the medical profession, or you look at the legal profession. They become ossified in that way, and they're not nimble and able to change. And it's the individual that can maneuver. They're all the big Bismarck, the big battleship that takes 7 hours to be able to turn,
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that's why we sank it.
You're talking about it like in Vajrayana, but I don't see it any different in any of the traditions that I've been in. Once something becomes a dogmatic religion, I think that it no longer serves its purposes as well as it could. And that's a clash that I'm constantly having in Taoism, because I have no interest in the religious side of what people are doing, or the dogmatic side, but it's not because I have a distaste for the religion. It's because I believe that it's a restriction on actual development within practice.
If anyone has been listening to this from the start, then I have to make a very serious correction.
Yeah.
I'm not advocating in any way that all these Vajrayana practitioners start practicing Taoism.
Yeah.
They have to practice the right Taoism.
Right. Okay.
The right methodologies. So I would say, if they practice the methodologies such as you teach, and people like you teach, then there can be a real transformation. But a lot of the nonsense I've seen, and hey, I've got about 200 books on Taoism on my computer and PDF files and so on, and I've read most of them and so on.
A lot of testicle weight swinging.
Well, it just, it's shocking, sometimes when you have a realization, I did not realize that all my efforts were, putting vinegar into a leaky kettle.
Right, okay, sure, yeah.
Rather than being able to deposit qi into a containment field that I could develop and I could start to feel, and I could, even though in my life I've had experiences where there was something there. I felt a thing there, and those memories are very vivid, but I didn't really know quite how that came about, or I didn't have a methodology to develop.
Do you know what causes a lot of Taoism to fall down, in my opinion? A lot of Qigong, a lot of Taoism falls down because they believe it's based on visualization. That, in my opinion, that's what it is, rather than the quality that you develop.
I think you're onto something there, because visualization or imagination is something very different than qi.
Yeah, completely.
It's different. And we're either directly taught or certainly led to believe that wherever your thought goes, qi follows.
Yes.
Maybe, again, if you divided energy into different types of energy, yes, where thought goes, sensation and experience follows, but that's not this stuff of qi that we're talking about.
There's an interesting concept within the Chinese phrase of that, yidao, qidao, like where the mind goes, the qi flows, or whatever people translate it as. But actually the Chinese character Dao can mean follow, but can also mean the fruition of a journey. So essentially you could retranslate that term, if you wanted to, as the resultant journey that your mind goes through will transform the qi. It would be another way of looking at it, a little bit more complex. And that's more in line with what I've been taught and how I work, so that I would say that if you try to generate an experience with your mind, you will have an experience. But if you try to transform the quality of your mind in its chronic overall state, then it transforms the quality of the qi in an overall state, and then the qi will arise. Because the experience is nothing. It's a sensation. It's okay, like whatever, but it's not the actual result. So I don't think the yi needs to go anywhere, or the mind needs to go anywhere. I think the mind needs to transform. And that's what most of our work is to do. But I can only apply that within my tradition. I can't comment on others that I see or anything like that. But I do wonder if there's similar issues. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Would you say the average Shmo, Vajrayana practitioner, young person, Shmo is not a bad word.
I was going to say, I think I'm the average Shmo in
Shmo,
Taoism.
It means a Shmo or a Schnook, or that's not a bad word. It doesn't mean schmuck. Shmo means just.
It's like an old American term to me.
It's a Yiddish term, It just means some poor guy or woman. Would you say the average person who has no Dan Qian, as you call it, can develop that especially if they're a meditator, develop that in 2-3 years?
Who say again? Who has no dantian?
Yeah, has no. The average person, though they're a Buddhist and they're doing their practice and they're doing their visualization, their mantras, whatever. Do you think they could develop a dantian in 2-3 years?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Problem solved.
The establishing of the lower dantian can take place in about 7 days.
Wow.
To be honest, not filling it, maybe, but the filling it's different.
Obviously,
but establishing it.
Obviously, I'm a great failure to my mother and my friends, and my family.
No, not at all. Not even slightly. No, I think you've gone beyond what most humans would be capable of effort-wise with your retreats and your practice over those years.
Well, that's good. That's redeeming, because that's what's needed. That could really change people's practice, change their whole orientation, and they could, carry on. They don't have to be Taoists. Carry on and be a Buddhist, but just integrate techniques and understandings, and require some philosophy and some wisdom. integrate methods which can build the energy you need to fuel this monster called Vajrayana.
There's a temple I know in northern Thailand, Theravada, and obviously Buddhism, forest tradition, that all of their practitioners have dantian.
Wow.
Yeah, they would have their own terms for it, obviously, but chatting with the monks there a little bit, and even just hanging around them. So they have methods that are developing it, and they have their own. And I think that's quite rare in Theravada, as far as I'm aware. So
they're the guys who die, and then their bodies don't decay, right?
Yeah,
yeah, and they give off an odor of flowers for weeks.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Vajrayana does recognize. Well, they don't detail it. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
They're nowhere is they're detailed. Okay, here's a regular body. Here's a light body. Well, wait a minute. How did those cells, tissues, sinews? How did you make that? That's a big gap in information.
Yep.
There's nothing. Maybe there's something in Taoism. I'm sure there is, but there's no explanation of what that actually means in terms of your construction, but also in terms of the methodology. That okay, now you have, in other words, it doesn't happen overnight. So what would it be like if you're 20% there, or if you're 23%? That's not told in Vajrayana, and so people have no idea. They just do their practice and they hope one day something's going to happen. Like if I'm in dark, stories.
Yes.
She was in dark retreat for 25 years in the pitch dark, and when they came in there, her body had completely evaporated. Well, that doesn't help me. I don't know what went on.
So is there literally no discussion then of the direct cause that leads to that effect for something like that? Of say light body or something, one of these high level things?
I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a description of the techniques that you can read in the books and so on, but there is no guidance as to what to expect, or even stages of the path, I would say.
That's funny, see, because Vajrayana, from my limited understanding, looks actually a lot more sequential and linear than some other traditions, say like Zen or something like this. So I'm surprised. I would have thought that what I see at the beginning, that sequential process, would have carried on further and further down the line. But
it's very sequential in terms of what you call self-realization of understanding nature of mind. Yes. Very, very detailed, complex, and profound
kind
teachings.
of nailed that.
But the other component, the energetic component, that's tremendous. That's missing, and that's why one teacher that I had said very clearly, you cannot have Mahamudra or Dzogchen unless you are in the central channel, unless you have entered the central channel. It was shocking to me. He said, "Oh, it's not just a understanding. No, if you're in the central channel, that is Mahamudra, that is Dzogchen. You're not like, oh man," and people are going, "Oh yeah, I'm having a Mahamudra experience." Unless you energetically, unless you have biophysically, you could say bioenergetically entered the central channel, you're not really having any. How could you possibly have a experience of the core of being unless you're in the core of being?
So how do they do that? How do they do that? Is there a rationale or an explanation for getting into the central channel, or how it's built or developed?
I do believe that Pierce, in the combining the Hindu system as well. Yeah. It is all through the chakras. Yeah. And there are these. Here's my theory. Sure. Yeah. There are these things called granti.
Yep.
Or
what they call the knots, right?
Knots. Yeah. Which, again, in Vajrayana they talk about doing your sawing, it'll untie the knots. It's kind of very vague. What are those knots? Nobody talks about blah blah blah. My understanding, I would say a little bit my experience, but not really my understanding, is those knots they're actually not knots from the point of view of the body. They're supposed to be there because you're not supposed to be zinging into the central channel while you're trying to make a cup of tea. The central channel is like your source of beingness, it's like your God self, your core of existence. And you're not, during your life, you're not supposed to be in there with your consciousness, as far as biology is concerned. Yeah. And those granti are actually your protective buffers so that you don't fall into the center. You're trying to make tea and now I'm with God suddenly. Sure. So we're going against our natural, obviously we're going against our natural biological state. by trying to get enlightened. The body just wants to, like a blade of grass, you can grow and die, who cares?
Yes.
So, you know, we crazy people somebody found out a long time ago that there's some exit strategies possible. Strangely enough, or, you know, as some people wrote, the psychology of man's possible evolution. We do have an unused proprietary system that can be put online. But, and again, in my talk and my future book about chakras, the chakras are not a spiritual system, for God's sakes. They're just your natural biology. You can repurpose them and make them into a spiritual system, but that's not what they're there for. They're just part of your anatomy. It's an energetic anatomy, a photonic anatomy, but that's just anatomy. It's just biology, bioenergetic physiological phenomena. So the grunti are a important natural preventing you from accidentally or unintentionally going where you don't belong. So, you know, you could say your life force, your information energy is coming, then it fills your body, now you have an experience of being alive, right? So through the grunti, at any chakra, you can, what they call, pierce that area, and you can enter into the central channel going against the natural order of things, and then you can do that. And so you could do that just by concentration. You know, if you were so powerful, and this is a big problem because very few people, I think if you said, how many people have that capacity for laser-like mind capacity? I don't care how many years they try to do it. I don't have that. I've been meditating a lot of years. I don't have a laser mind that can, you know, stay on one subject for an hour or 10 hours.
It's a tricky thing, huh?
No, I could watch TV for 10 hours. That's about it. You know, that's the only. That's my attention will be there for 10 hours. Yeah, if it's a good movie, but not on one point. So the different techniques that are used, even mantra, are essentially you can pierce that and enter the central channel. I think that Taoism is quite correct that, and I've blogged about that too, that you don't want to concentrate energy in the head or the heart because they're not built for that. First of all, they're hard. They're not soft cavities. You want a cavity that can expand, be distorted around, do whatever you do, and do that in your head or your heart. You're just going to blow the whole thing out, especially if you make a mistake. But even if you didn't make a mistake, that's not a great place to try to enter into the central channel. You know, it's dangerous to me. And you know, you'll either go crazy, or you'll go what? Well, you go in the heart. You'll go into abject fear. I don't know, something strange. But it can't pressurize. It can't take that kind of pressure. And so I think the abdomen is the place. And strangely enough, you know, in Buddhism in general, Theravada included, we're taught shamatha, concentrating on your nose. I don't know why. The whole thing is concentrating on your nose. You're supposed to calm your mind, and you just watch the breath at your nose. It is absurd, and after a while you realize it's making it more and more and more and more. No, get away from your. Forget about your nose exists. You know. Even when I did voice training, here's the mantra that he used. It's called the link ladder system. He says, "Cool air comes in and gets warm in the belly." Cool air comes in, gets warm in the belly, and the whole voice training was to learn to speak from here. No matter what, and opera singing, whatever it is, you learn to emote from here, speak from here, express from here. And this voice teacher was so wonderful. I think it's passed on now, maybe. But as soon as somebody said, and it was mainly actors who taking these courses, but as soon as they say something, he says, "You're in your throat. You're in your palate. You're in your. What are you doing there? Get down there." You could immediately catch where they were, and then he would try to find out why, which was always fun, because the technique he used was like this. He says, "Why are you speaking from your palate? I don't know. You do know. I don't know. You do know. I don't know. You do know." And if he had to do that 20 times, eventually they go, "Well, I feel if I don't stay, you know," and then they did know. So that was his Zen-like technique of freeing the voice. But, you know, he had something going on there that Vajrayanas could learn from, that don't hold your energy up here. So it makes sense that this is the most common place where we try to enter the central channel.
Okay.
But again, the instructions that we are given are basically just try to pressurize, hold your breath, kumbhaka, you pull up your anus, and try to visualize your energy going into the central channel.
Right, okay. To be fair, it's not much different for a lot of Nei Gong practice as well. There's similar instructions, which is quite lacking.
Quite lacking, yes.
Yeah.
And so, now I get it. At least that much I get. I know what I'm supposed to do. So it's very, very exciting for me, even though it's like this weekend with you. It was wonderful, but bittersweet. Somewhat sad. Yeah. Because
I apologize.
Because I'm not 30 years old. I'm not 18 years old. So to have the time to accomplish this, I have the will, but to have the time in life or even the vitality, I mean, you don't have the same vitality as 30 or 20, no matter what you like to think. So that's bittersweet that this was not available. But hey, we didn't have cell phones either, and we didn't have a lot of things.
Sure.
So we also didn't have Damo. So that's just a karmic thing. But it's the sweet part of it is, wow, this is amazing. Let's go for it.
What do you think will be the reaction if you were to take that, or take your understandings that you're talking about here and then share it with, I don't know, top Rinpoches in Bhutan or Tibet, or would they be open to discussion on the whole?
The first obstacle is if I am not lazy or distracted or stupid enough to not optimize, because it's up to me to make use of it now. So
sure, okay. Yeah.
So I've got to dedicate myself to that, because it's it's easy to coast, especially after a certain period of your life. You've done all this shit. You go, can I finally rest? And then you realize, no, you're just getting started again.
No, there's always
here we go
else.
again.
Yeah. And I've been told after you die, perhaps there's another layer.
But you had a wonderful discussion with the Tulku of Tongten Gyalpo. Very, very high guy in Bhutan, and someone who I love dearly.
He was a nice fellow.
Wonderful person.
Yes.
And he was very interested and very attentive to what you had to say. Yeah. And probably if you hung around with those guys more, they'd pick up on it.
I trade it for archery. I do some archery with them. That'd be good fun.
Oh yeah. He's an archer. And remember he gave that story about someone who's was very well known in the Tibetan field, Ngusho Ken, one of the great masters of the ones who came right out of Tibet, and he had told him personally that he found the Hindu methods of meditation was even more, or Tsalung was more effective because they worked on all the chakras.
I was quite surprised when he said that, actually.
Yeah. So these really great masters like Ngusho Ken or Kala Rinpoche and so on, they're much more innovative than anyone who really realizes these states. For sure, they're rebel. For sure, they're going on their own. Externally, like Kala Rinpoche, very much in the tradition, but internally, I know he's doing. He was flying out there. He was experimenting. You've got to be that rebellious, and this is where the idea of the Tulshuk comes from, which is the crazy wisdom, which is a bad translation. The real translation, as people have pointed out, is dharmic conduct, or discipleship, the discipleship. So it's like having that alert mind, having being on your edge, being in yourself, being in your core. That's really all it means.
That's a retranslation of crazy wisdom.
Oh yes,
really? That's very different.
Yeah, Tulshuk means following your dharmic discipline practice with awareness. That's all it is. Now, there's no word meaning crazy in there.
Okay.
It actually means entering. It means entering the field. Entering your being. Really, it is. So it's just being.
How did it get translated as crazy wisdom? Because obviously I've heard it justified.
Trungpa.
Right. Okay. Chokin Trungpa. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he was crazy wisdom, but it means that these people function in an eccentric way.
Yep.
And But again, that was a license for people to just act wacky, but. An eccentric way means
saying eccentric means to deviate from the dogma of the tradition.
Eccentric. Yeah, you're dancing to your own drummer because it's a drummer of wisdom. You're aligned with wisdom mind. One of the great eccentric.
Very different take on it.
One of the great eccentric beings was Dujun Rinpoche's the son, and when I was fortunate enough to be with him back in the day, and before I went into my 3-year retreat, I asked what lamas were around where I could, the ones I really respected, the ones I felt were enlightened beings, and he certainly was. What advice do you have? And he was so eccentric. He just leans over and whispers in my ear, "Only this, wisdom mind. Only wisdom mind." What the? But he was completely right.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, if you could do it, but very profound instruction.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And there was another time, and you were at the big. No, you haven't been at the big stupa in Nepal. There's that big gigantic stupa, and we showed up there, and I didn't know quite who he was at the time, but when we showed up there, hundreds of people crowded around. Oh my God!
Yeah.
And then we went up in the stupa, and I was wearing all white at the time, and I had my Nikon camera, and that was the days before digital cameras, so I had the Nikon with the big lens. And there's all these people there, and I'm all excited. And he leans over to me and goes, "Do manis or something. Don't be an ordinary mind."
Right. Okay.
Holy crap! Because he was always with wisdom mind, and here I am being my monkey self.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
So. So that's Tulshuk. He was very eccentric, and he did a lot of stories about him, the way he acted. It was very crazy. Matter of fact, I was his court photographer, and we did things like he'd go, "Okay," because it was very special to have somebody with this kind of camera there. It's not well known, not common. So we'd go, and we'd go to the elephant park, and he'd sit on an elephant, and I'd take his picture, and he'd pose like this.
Okay.
And I'd run on a horse, and he'd be on a horse, and he'd pose. And I found him hysterically funny, he was really enjoyable because he was just wacky, and it wasn't like an ego thing. It was just like he's just having fun, It's like a kid, but a very profound kid. So
that's more in line with how you would translate, what people would call crazy wisdom these days, rather than abusive or
no.
Filling the body with toxins or
I've known guys like that too who were wildly alcoholic but had they had precognition and so on and so forth, but to me I didn't like that. I'd been around a few abusive teachers. That was kind of the way they taught, and they would accurately tell you what kind of scum you were, and really really very hurtful sexual things, and women would come in, they would say horrible sexual things about them and so on.
Sure.
But
sounds pretty horrible.
I didn't want to. No, to me that's not my style. I don't want to see that. So no. But I'm sure it's the same as the Taoist. What do they call those guys? It's the Taoist crazy. Well,
I think they normally just call them Taoist teachers quite often. There's a lot of them, unfortunately.
Traditionally, the ones off in the mountains.
The
what they call it, the 5 mountains, the Wuxi, whatever.
Traveling
around and writing crazy haiku poetry or whatever. So I think it's a very similar phenomenon, and those people often have to be hermits because they're so unusual and they're so unable to be with humankind. They're so different than human beings. They aren't human beings anymore to me. Actually, they're a different species now, really.
Sure. Okay.
And that's one of my most profound moments in retreat. I wouldn't say my most uplifting.
Yes.
But a profound moment was when I was doing practice and I realized I was going to lose my human shell.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we normally would not think of what that, how do you even conceive of that? But when you have an experience where your entire connection to humanity, whatever that phenomena, that complex of ideas, feelings, sensations, affiliations, emotion, that whole thing dissolving. And I've never liked the human race I like people, but not the race.
Yep.
But at that point, it was amazing how resistant I was, because I realized I would be insane, literally insane, and I would literally have no connection to people anymore.
Okay.
It was terrified me. It shocked me when I really at the point of letting go of that. And I intentionally did not let go. That was a mistake, I'm sure.
Okay.
But I knew I would be a crazy Tulshuk. That would be my fate. Maybe that wouldn't have been true, but that was the experience at the threshold.
Yeah, sure.
That now I would no longer be part of that human race. And I felt quite nostalgic for the human race, which shocked me.
Okay.
And, I don't want to feel that when I die, that, I want to be back in the human race. Come on, it's time to leave. Go somewhere else.
Sure, okay.
But that happens. damn it.
Ah.
And that just probably, that was a good experience, but it just mean I probably needed to do some different practices, so I would let go and be a crazy person.
Well, there's still time.
Yeah.
You've got time to disappear into the mountains and become an eccentric.
I've gone quite far into the insanity.
You've made it to Ubud. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
There's plenty of opportunity for insanity here.
Well, it's a kind of a dichotomy because in some ways I'm someone who, the conflicts of our being. I'm sure you know this one very well. In some ways, there is a part of me, and at the end of 3-year retreat, here's what Kalo Rinpoche says, this is the last message he gave you. You've done very well. You've stayed in the 3-year retreat. That was number one. Not that you've accomplished anything, but you stayed.
I mean, that is actually an attainment, I think.
He says, and now you pick one practice from this section, one from that, and then now do a 12-year retreat.
Oh, really?
Because that was just a way to find out what are the things you like best.
Okay,
sure. Whatever those three, one yidam, you have one protector and one, this is 6 yogas. Okay, now do 12 years. I'm going. So this was just a smorgasbord. This was just a cafeteria to find out which is your favorite food.
It's like finishing your 3-year prison sentence and finding out they've extended it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
For good behavior, they expended it.
Joys.
But in some ways, I could have spent my entire life in retreat, and I could now. But in the same time, the dichotomy is, I haven't got the equipment for it. I haven't got the temperament for it. Right, I really couldn't. Yeah. I would like to, but,
I doubt many people have for something like that.
I mean, a lot of people wanting to, but but you know that you're not up to it. It's like, no, I can't lift that barbell. I'd like to, but I ain't got those muscles.
Sure. I mean, lots of people who say they want to be renunciates and do Lenten retreats, but it doesn't sound
it's a lot harder than you think, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard.
I would imagine so.
Oh yeah, the isolation, being stuck with I learned about men, that's for sure, how horrible they are.
I'd rather be on my own, I think.
I didn't, because I'd never been in the army, I'd never been in this situation, so I didn't know what it was like living with just these men. Horrible people.
Did they all finish the 3-year retreat?
No, I think 2 or 3 dropped out.
Okay.
We had one Frenchman who was literally a borderline. He was a very mentally unwell person. But that's another thing. There's no psychological counseling during the retreat, and there's no psychological admission process.
Right.
So we got
that sounds dangerous.
You just throw everybody in there with all of their neuroses and their psychoses, and really bad. The women's retreat was worse. And we had one woman who was the other retreatants. They'd find holes cut in their clothing, cutting holes, and then she tried to start the place on fire. They did kick her out for trying to torch the place.
Rightly so. I mean, you don't want to be burnt. Your 3-year retreat was ruined because everybody died in a fire halfway through.
But in today's liberal environment, they would say, "Oh, give her a break. Sure, she's okay. Let her kill her."
Well, I think the fact you got through it, I think, is right. I think that's quite an achievement to get through the 3 years, 3 months, and come out with at least most of your marbles intact. I think is an impressive feat.
It is interesting now, though, particularly juggling, and I don't know if I'm juggling, but I have 2 very distinct. In other words, my meeting with you and having the honor of learning from you. I won't say working with you, because I'm just learning from you. I ain't working nothing. But having that, I'm not, and I don't wish to, and I don't need to give up my visualization, deities, mantric, my relationship to these forces. I find them quite lovely. Like Machik Labdran, she's the most beautiful goddess. I mean, to me, it's very enriching. Matter of fact, it's a lifeline in many ways. Like when I'm sick, I don't go, holding my energy. No, I'm going like I'm working with. I'm praying them, but I'm working with. To me, they're very real. They are very real forces and processes, and they work, and they do what they say they're going to. That's the one thing about Vajrayana. It does what it says it's going to do, but there's a lot of missing pieces. But and the part that it does do that. It just we don't have the fuel. Simple as that.
Okay.
But it's interesting to juggle these 2 together, and I'm very interested to see what happens. Of course, I will never mix them in that sense. But I will take these beautiful techniques and see how it enriches. It's not enriching the Dharma. I can't do anything with the Dharma. I want to see what it does to me. I have those pieces in. The only Dharma that exists is the one in me, right? and people have their Dharma in them and so on. So I'm the experiment of, pouring this Dharma into me for 40 years and letting it percolate. Whether I'm practicing or not, to me it still percolates.
Sure, yeah.
And so now adding this wonderful ingredient to the soup, it's more than an ingredient. It's the fire itself to cook the whole thing. I'm very excited to see what it does to help my Buddhism, because I say that ultimately, then if I can help other poor schmo Buddhists to extricate them, because it is truly problematic, and it's been very sad for myself and the people that the old timers that I confer with. Many of them have a similar understandings of scratching their heads and saying what's going on and what's wrong.
Sure, okay.
There's a whole coterie of the old timers like that,
yes,
who say after all these years, what's missing and what's happening and why isn't this working? And I think so.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being so honest and open about it. It's really interesting hearing, actually.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for bringing me to Bhutan. It was interesting for me to see Vajrayana and have contact with it, kind of near its core.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. I can't say that I either understand Vajrayana fully and, well, not fully definitely, but I don't get it. And I'm aware that in many ways it's almost the polar opposite of Taoism. It's funny, I saw direct similarities, but then also polar opposites. So it was quite interesting being around all of that.
I do believe that in the most simplistic way of explanation, Taoism, as I understand it now, and that's mainly through you, so I'm prejudiced, biased anyway, it starts from the bottom up. Vajrayana starts from the top down.
Right, okay, sure.
That is absolutely true, but
it's about as opposite as you can get.
That is a problem, because they may start from the top down, but they never get to that bottom part.
Yeah, sure, okay.
So they've got to work both ends towards the center.